Welcome to Block and Build, a podcast from Convergence Magazine. I'm your host and the publisher of Convergence, Caden Mock. On this show, we are building a roadmap for the movement that's working to block the impacts of rising authoritarianism while building the strength and resilience of the broad front that we need to win. This week on the show, I'm joined by the National Political Director of Indivisible, Dani Negrete. As you may likely know, Indivisible is one of the national organizations responsible for mobilizing over 100,000 people across all 50 states for last month's hands-off protests. And they're driving mass action in response to all of the threats posed by MAGA in this moment. We'll explore how that organizing happened and where we go from here. But first, of course, these headlines. Last Friday, the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and Democratic candidate for governor of New Jersey, Ras Baraka, was arrested for quote-unquote trespassing at Delaney Hall, a local immigration detention center. The center was recently reopened to handle increased ICE activity in the region, and his trip to the facility was, initially, to observe conditions there. He joined a crowd of protesters outside the gates after leaving a secured area upon request. Officers came out and arrested him there anyway. This week, he and his lawyers are, of course, disputing the absurd charges, which could result in up to 30 days in jail if he's found guilty. Prosecutor for the case and the interim U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, Alina Habba, spoke on Fox News a few days before his arrest, platforming Trump propaganda talking points about the facility and targeting Baraka by name. In a sane world, we would see countercharges of entrapment and targeted harassment. If you'd like to hear more directly from Mayor Baraka and other elected officials and advocates who were there on that day, Working Families Party hosted a national call about the incident that you can watch on YouTube. We'll put the link to that in the show notes. Over the winter, we highlighted the wins that grassroots organizations had at the ballot box using direct democracy to pass popular policies that benefit working people. It shouldn't surprise anyone that, in many states, those wins are being threatened by right-wing lawmakers. Missouri voters passed a set of progressive measures last fall, covering paid sick leave, raising the minimum wage in the state, and enshrining the right to reproductive freedom in the state constitution. The GOP caucus in the state legislature, however, is working to undermine these wins. In addition to working on legislation that will roll back the paid sick leave law, they're fast-tracking a referendum to put the abortion amendment back on the ballot, potentially in a special election. We know that special elections often have extremely low turnout, which can be really advantageous for the far right. And this exact playbook is not new when it comes to how the right uses this power to overturn popular progressive policy, especially in aggressively gerrymandered states. Missourians are, of course, fighting back. They rallied at the state house this week, and they're getting organized, including building a coalition that's working to prevent the legislature from overriding successful ballot measures that the majority party doesn't agree with. We're going to be following the story more as it unfolds. And finally, I think it's worth shouting out the new mayor of Omaha, Nebraska, John Ewing Jr., who defeated hardcore MAGA incumbent Jean Stothert. This race was supposed to be a shoo-in for Stothert, who was running for her fourth term. Worried about the dead weight of being associated with the Trump-Musk federal cuts, she leaned heavily away from MAGA economics and into anti-trans culture war scaremongering to motivate her base. And she got burned. It feels really timely because last week at the Narrative Power Summit, I got to talk about block and build strategy in conversation with other trans organizers who are seeing this borne out in message testing, campaigns, and other efforts across the country. Polling from the Transgender Law Center, for instance, shows that across ideology, people resonate with the idea that people should be allowed to pursue self-expression and belonging. And linking the anti-trans panic, as Ewing's campaign capably did, to the desire of the far right to dismantle any semblance of public service and a social safety net is a winning strategy that welcomes trans people back into the popular coalition against fascism. All right. So the Indivisible project began in 2016 as a viral guide to resisting Trump's agenda, and it's since grown into this national network of thousands of local groups, millions of activists across every state. Last month, they were a major part of the organizing effort behind the hands-off protests, which saw 1,300 rallies take place across all 50 states, the largest single demonstration against the second Trump administration so far. Joining me to discuss how that national organizing happens and also what we do with the momentum that it's built is the National Political Director of Indivisible, Dani Negrete. Dani, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Caden. It's great to be on.
Yeah, I always appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and I have really appreciated your political and strategic acumen. So
I honestly, the opportunity to be in community with folks and share the different ways that people are coming together in this moment and thinking about the particular challenges and the reality of the crisis is so important. And having an opportunity to chat with you today is just great. I'm happy to be here.
awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about the shift from. I mean, I think this continues to be something that I think is really worth digging deep on, talking about, and thinking about together is the difference between 2025 and 2017. Could you tell me a little bit about the ways that Indivisible has adapted over the past 6 months to really meet the moment that we're in?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the immediate realities that we faced coming into this second Trump administration that was a stark difference for all of us from the first is that he won the popular vote. And we understood that he was coming into the White House and back into Washington, D.C., with what he believed to be a mandate and with what many elite actors and institutions bought into as a mandate, even though it was a historically narrow popular vote win on historically narrow lines. Uh, it was convincing enough for enough people that they were willing to look at this extremist and unpopular agenda and really consider whether or not they could find their own role in it. And that was not the same dynamic that we were dealing with in 2017. For folks who remember, back in 2017, Donald Trump was seen as more of an anomaly. His election was a fluke. It was the result of a historically challenged campaign that was run by the Democrats that year, and his entry into his role as a politician and as president was really not seen as an indicator of where the country was at. That refrain of "this is not who we are" was very common in the first Trump administration. It's much harder to say that nowadays, and there's obvious reasons for that. But that difference, that shift in understanding of his role and how long he's going to be here is really informing how we're thinking about organizing in this moment. We cannot be building a movement that's trying to go back to 2023 or 2022. We can't be building a movement that's trying to go back to 2015 even. We need to be working with people across the coalition to build a really big tent that is envisioning what the next era of American politics looks like. Because unfortunately, this era has been defined by Donald Trump as a center of gravity since 2014, really. That White House Correspondents' Dinner that allegedly set everything off. Yeah, but that what that means for us in practice is that we're looking at how we engage with Congress to prevent the worst harms of the Trump administration, but we also have to be looking at much more significantly about how states can not just resist but defy this administration's agenda. We're seeing, early on, a good number of states' attorneys general make big moves with lawsuits against the Trump administration to try to stop them. But part of making those successful, part of making sure that those are seen not just as legal wins, but political wins, is making sure that people understand the power of the states and what blue states can be doing. That's one thing. Another thing is making sure that we've got activists and organizers who are seeing the different levers of power outside of elected office. So there are businesses that very quickly either supported Donald Trump as part of the oligarchy or have at the very least, capitulated to the administration's preferences. Law firms very quickly started to react to the Trump administration by complying in advance and giving him and the administration what they demanded. And schools, universities, education as a really core central piece of civil society needs to be understood as an actor in this and not just a target for the administration to take its work out on. So part of it is continuing to build local power as we've been doing since 2016. But the other part of it is orienting folks' understanding of power and where it exists in their lives.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like that expanded power analysis is so important because of the way that like basically the like strong executive has become like part of our cultural understanding of like where power exists in our society, and like largely to our detriment. And like that's been a trend since really the 70s, that like it's not by accident, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the the gulf between individuals, individual voters, individual constituents, and the power that is held and either weaponized or leveraged or influenced on their behalf feels brighter than ever before. If you're an individual voter and you want to have an impact on the course of the government or the course of our political history, it feels very difficult to see that in your own life. But when you work collectively with a network, with a local Indivisible group, or in coalition with a group like Working Families Party or your Move On allies, whatever it may be, that you're putting your individual power collectively together, and you can see it move much more clearly. And that's what we try to do with the Indivisible group model at the local level.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that group model, because I think that one of the things that I find so compelling about the work that you all do is that like you've really been able to like leverage these local chapters and like build leadership and protagonism at like the local and regional level that then helps turn out people to, whether it's like a call campaign to call into Congress or like showing up in the streets. Could you talk a little bit about like, I mean, I also think that there's like a thing that's like in the like during the Biden years, like what also did that chapter model look like, and what does leadership development look like within Indivisible?
Yeah, so we are so fortunate that this network of local groups exists. And one of the really special things I think about Indivisible groups is that they're autonomous. This is not a top-down network. They operate within the bounds of their own, established community norms and expectations. And within those groups, they are able to elevate leaders, determine how they want to operate. We offer them strategy, we offer them guidance and messaging, and many ways to engage, take actions by calling their member of Congress or visiting their member's office. But many of them are simultaneously focused on hyper-local issues and state level issues. And that's how they're bringing in a lot of new and not yet engaged folks, because people see the impacts of their, the local power that Indivisible groups have. It's a really beautiful thing when I get the opportunity to meet with and talk to Indivisible groups and realize that they've been running robust campaigns around state and local issues that were not in my field of view from the national level, but they've been doing it with a high degree of sophistication and a really clear strategy, because these are just local nodes of power that have been popping up across the country and continue to grow day after day, month after month. And on the note about the Biden years, I will say that's where we saw some of the most impressive work at the state and local level, because we very quickly went into a situation where Democrats had trouble moving things through Congress because Manchin and Sinema were intransigent on the major priorities that the administration was trying to pursue. And then we lost the House shortly after that. And the ability to move things in DC was almost non-existent during that period. which made national level campaigning and national level actions actually really hard to mobilize during that era. We were able to do some good work, and we were very proud of the work that we did do, but it was really challenging. And most of the narrative coming from Democrats and elected officials was look ahead to 2024. It wasn't what can we fix right now? It was look ahead to 2024. We got to retake the House, and then we can do all the things. But in the midst of all of that, indivisible groups across the country were moving really important work at the state and local level that they were able to move. They were stopping the worst of Republican attacks on rights, voting rights, civil rights in red states. They were making big advances in purple states. We had a incredible campaign run by Indivisibles in Arizona, along with a broad coalition of groups to get the Arizona abortion ballot initiative on the ballot. And, the other election results in the state in 2024 were rough, but we did see that abortion ballot initiative pass because there had been long-term work happening over the previous 2 years to make sure that at the state level, we were still making progress. And so, I think that was a big dynamic during the Biden years that is going to continue, and I'm hopeful that it does, because that was as many people know, a big oversight by Democrats during the 2010s was the power of the states and where you can actually develop and advance agendas.
Yeah. And I think especially that direct democracy piece seems to be a really big deal increasingly, where it's not an accident. I talked about this Missouri ballot initiatives that are being undermined right now. But that direct democracy aspect is also a place where, again, it's we can really use that one to pass policy that makes a big difference to actual human beings, but also builds that protagonism. That those are wins that are meaty and mean something.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And scoring those wins in states one at a time, it is a hard way to go. It is slow going and it's tough. But one of the important things is that where we have power in some of these states to actually make these advances, we want to be creating hubs of liberty in some of the states where people can, have certain freedoms, and there's a real contrast between who's trying to take them away and who's fighting for them. It sets up a clear dynamic that is beneficial to understand who, you can't hide behind court rulings if the people voted for a ballot initiative and there's a handful of politicians who are actively trying to take it away. There's a lot of opportunity to do that, especially in blue states. Blue states, I mean, J.B. Pritzker has been such a fighter in these past 6 months, or I keep forgetting how long Donald Trump's been in office. I guess
it honestly is 4. It's 4 months. I know.
It feels like it's been 2 years, and it's been hardly 100 days. But Pritzker has been really strong on this, and is specifically on building a exemplary way for a state to operate under conditions like this. What you can do with state level power as a blue state with a blue trifecta, we should be exploring that, and we should see Democrats exploring that in real ways to kind of push the boundaries and say, if you want to take away freedoms here, if you want to enforce a unpopular policy, you got to do it.
Yeah. Well, and that feels particularly alive to me because I'm a Californian, and Gavin Newsom is question mark.
Yeah. I am a California native, and I'm from Los Angeles County originally, and it's so wild to see the calculus that some people like Newsom are undertaking right now. But it is a drastic miscalculation, and I think most people would assume that Gavin Newsom is undertaking some version of a calculation here. It's not like these are deeply held beliefs that he has.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one thing that's become very clear is, like, I'm not sure what his deeply held beliefs are, aside from the fact,
Yeah,
like, he thinks that he's hot shit.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I all love to podcasters and to the platforms like this, but I do have questions if you're a governor and you've started your own podcast.
Yeah, it's like, you actually do have a really big platform already, my guy, like
Yeah, yeah, you don't need to kick off a new version of that with Charlie Kirk as your first guest.
Totally, yeah, I don't know, just, like, there's so many questions.
And you know, on the specific point about Newsom, he's really exemplifying that version of the Democratic response to Trump in this era that looks so weak and so scared. You know,
Yeah,
you see this historically narrow popular vote victory, and your response is, well, I guess we got to start adopting all the shit that he it wants to do, the attacks on trans people and
mhm,
attacks on immigrants, taking away healthcare coverage for immigrant communities. And in the midst of all of that, we actually have Democrats who are not only willing to do some fighting, but are being rewarded for it
yeah,
and being celebrated for it, lauded for it. It's such a clear choice point. I don't understand what set of calculus you're undertaking to go down the Newsom path right now, but we'll see before too long whether or
yeah,
not that one pays
yes.
off. I'm doubtful.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things that we're always trying to do on the show is, like, pay attention to what those signals might be, and I think that, like, that pathway it's more than just capitulation, it's collaboration on some level.
Yeah,
The thing that worries me about it too is just that, like, it then makes it so easy for people who are disillusioned with the state of politics to be like, look, see, they are all the same, we can't do anything about it. It's like, there's a level on which it almost feels to me like a psyop, it's like,
right. I
it's like
mean,
demobilizing.
it is demobilizing, and you're doing their work for them
Exactly.
uh, in tangible ways. There's you know, Newsom may or may not love the current state of the Democratic Party. There's a lot to be said about changes that need to happen within the Democratic Party. But if your approach to reforming the Democratic Party is just to make it more like the Republican Party, you're actually not doing yourself any favors, especially if you're going to be the type of person who's likely to mount a campaign in 2028. You're building their narrative for them
Mhm.
well in advance, and you're never going to meet the expectations of the people who are already inclined not to vote for you.
Yeah, it's a yikes for me. I think that, like, one of the things I also wanted that in some ways this is a good pivot point towards is thinking about, like, these insights from this first 4 months, like, looking where where the hot spots are, about kind of like what your assessment of our power in this moment is, right? That, like, where are some of the opportunities that Indivisible and your allies, like, where you are thinking about leaning in and, like, leaning harder on certain fights, that maybe have emerged, especially I think over the past couple of months.
Yeah, so there's a real truth that Republicans in this moment where they believe they have a mandate are overreaching in as many directions as they can, and they seem to not have a concept of just how harmful that can be for them. Uh, One of those is reconciliation. Right now, the reconciliation bill is a true example of touching the stove. They have made it clear that the services, the programs that working people rely on are under threat, and they are happily running headlong into a fight where they have to defend the indefensible. And that is an area where we are really looking forward to leaning in and making sure that people understand the stakes of the reconciliation fight. They understand it's not just reconciliation, but it's how it's going to impact your own home.
Mhm.
Most people are say the word reconciliation, you're going to glaze over, which is totally fine. But when you talk about when you talk about attacks on Medicaid and
Mhm.
how that will impact your community and your family, that is essential for so many Americans. When you talk about uh, but the numerous communities that are currently engaged in this fight and how they're being actively dismissed by their representatives, constituents who are outright ignoring calls. They're outright refusing to do town halls because they want to hide away from the details of this bill. That resonates with people. And what we can do as a organizing group, as an organizing movement, is make sure that those moments are visible. Make sure that those choices that Republicans are making to ignore their constituents and hide behind their leadership is seen, is understood to be an active choice, and that they are choosing to pursue a harmful piece of legislation rather than protecting their own constituents. So the reconciliation is a big one. I also have to say, immigration specifically is like, it has been the one thing that so many Democrats and progressives have been afraid to touch because Donald Trump just consistently pulled higher on immigration throughout the
Mhm.
election and into this year. But he has so clearly overreached on immigration because he has no concept of what people actually voted for him for. The idea that he can enter office and start talking about deporting American citizens, or enter office and begin a regime of disappearances and abductions, basically, without any consequence. The story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, among several, is just inherently morally abhorrent to most regular people. And focusing in on those stories and making sure that those examples, those narratives, and those faces are out there and people understand what's happening on the streets in the country that they live in, is a place where we think we can make some inroads, have some real conversations with people about the behavior of this administration. And so we are leaning in there too. We want to make sure we're showing up with immigration partners and allies, so that this doesn't fade from the story and it's taken
Mhm.
as a implicit permission structure for Donald Trump to go further as he ramps up his deportation machine. So yeah, that is all. Those are specific issue areas that we're taking on and fights that we are eager to have. But in the midst of all of that, we're doing these mass mobilization efforts, and uh, it, it's about building a big tent, no matter what issue or fight it is that is bringing you off the sidelines and into action. And it's like a whole other body of work and mobilization to make these moments happen. But it, it is important to just to show people, show institutions, show other actors that we are not alone.
Mhm.
We are mobilized in this moment together, and we have an opportunity to show the world that we don't stand for this. That mandate is bullshit. It's not real. It never existed. And the vast majority of this country is in alignment that we support our democratic government, system of government. We actually like liberal democracy to a degree. We're not looking for this authoritarian military parade style, government of, by, and for Donald Trump. And having those moments, leaning into those visuals in those fights is actually a really important thing to do in this moment for Indivisible and for all of our coalition partners who we're very excited to be working with.
Yeah, honestly, watching Chuck Grassley get yelled at about immigration was like pretty spicy.
Yes.
Seeing that clip, like honestly, I'm like, oh yeah, like it's happening, right? Like that made my day in that way of like, it's like, oh, like it's not just me fretting about this and thinking about this and worrying about this. It's like all of these just like, I don't know, people honestly also who are not like me, right? Who are like, let's go. Like,
yeah, this old guy in Iowa, our life experience overlap might be 0, but he's pissed off at Chuck Grassley because Chuck Grassley is not standing up for due process. I'm pissed off at Chuck Grassley because Chuck Grassley is not standing up for due process. All right, like let's be in conversation. Let's be in community together.
yeah, I mean I like if there was ever a example of like what the Popular Front can look like here, like
yeah, uh, there's a lot of people talked about the broad coalition that Harris brought together, the Cheney to Chomsky, big tent, which you need more people in the tent. It can't just be the tent poles who are holding it up. But seeing those quotes, those quote tweets from the new Pope got me thinking. Oh yeah, I could be. I guess I'm in coalition with the new Pope.
yeah.
He hates JD Vance. That's okay. I can agree with that.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity, right, and this is like consistent with our analysis as well, is like the opportunity is also to take those narrative moments to like pull people towards us, to pull people towards like actual sort of like leftist center of gravity, instead of like letting the sort of like kind of like center left, if you want to call it that, sort of like pull us towards something normative and like look towards a visionary version of what the Popular Front could be, which is exciting.
I mean, if one of the most beneficial doorways to walk through into political consciousness is just like the simple acknowledgement that something is wrong. So like this the shit isn't right, and we need to fix this. Because once that doorway's open, you're actually looking, yes, at the immediate crisis, which we need to address and organize for, but you're looking for solutions broadly to what brought us here. The work that AOC and Senator Sanders have been doing to continue to hammer home the message about the oligarchy during this period is really important, because it's one thing to be pissed off about Trump and Trump alone, but being able to connect that to his enablers and to the systems of power that are supporting and upholding the administration right now is actually a good long-term power building strategy that is gonna hopefully keep people engaged beyond the era of Donald Trump, and really give them a framework for continuing to engage with politics in an ongoing way, and understanding what continues to be wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I've been seeing a lot of this too, just sort of like anecdotally from like my corner of the universe, where people are more interested in the conversation, like the analysis that we hold, and that has really driven a lot of our work over the past several years around this being sort of the like apex end game of a 50-60 year strategy from the far right? That this is not like, this doesn't emerge organically. This emerges out of trillions of dollars of investments over decades in like think tanks, spokespeople, politicians, like legal scholars, that like it's part of a package deal that like, I mean, we could go even maybe beyond the civil rights era to like the like labor movement wins for the 20s and 30s even. As part of this backlash. Like this is a long arc game that they're playing, and I think people are more interested in that conversation now than I think they've ever been, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, well, you're right that it is like the apex of their political project, and they have had, a long-term political project that they've been able to organize their party around, and their, even outside the party, their enablers, different parts of their coalition has been organized around a really clear political project that was encapsulated in Make America Great Again. We have to take things backwards. We have to turn back the clock on the 20th century. And the asymmetry is that it's hard to identify the political project that our broad coalition has been operating under, if there is even one to argue for,
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and being able to unite people in opposition during this time is a good stand-in for the moment. Opposition is a strong organizing force, but it is true that the true strength of their long-term power building has been a unifying project, and hopefully there's identifying a unifying project across a broad, diverse coalition, a big tent coalition, is very difficult. But one of the things that can help that is local level power, where people are taking back into their own hands their political destiny and determining what they will put up with and what they won't, and determining what they actually want to achieve with that political power that's back in their hands, and driving towards that really clearly and telling everyone what they're driving towards.
Yes.
I think real benefit that we have is people like progressive politics. People like the policies that we generally pursue. That we are not constrained by a need to lie blatantly like the right is. And so we just need to step into that a little bit more fully. And we do that by having people at the local and state level with really robust centers of power that they can leverage.
Yeah. The other thing regarding those local centers of power is I do want to also ask you about the relationships to other organizations, and like how that shapes the approach to the work, and how you all operate in coalitions in ways that like both respond to conditions while holding to some North Stars around values and politics.
Yeah, I mean, the coalition work, it's always been important. It's always been central to how we think about building power. And one of the really great things in this moment is that we've seen a lot of new formations, new organizing vehicles. 5051 is a great example here of new actors in this space that maybe made up of longtime activists and people who've been demonstrating for a long time, or new folks, but the organization itself is new. And so many of us are trying to engage new voices, respond to our existing bases, and also respond to all of the crises that are happening every day flowing out of DC. And we can't do that without actually building deep connections and being responsive, not in a transactional way, but in a collaborative way to the other organizations who have also been doing this work for a long time and who have been organizing with their own communities. We, Hands Off was a really great example of this, where we, in coalition with a large number of other groups, said April 5th is going to be a day for mobilization, for action in the streets. And as we were pulling this together, other groups who are not in regular communication, but are in broad coalition with us, were doing their own work and building their own. And people were bringing to the table the things that were mobilizing them. And what is most important right now is not to say, well, that doesn't fit here, but to figure out how it fits here. We got to figure out how to build the containers to make sure that we're fitting in all of the people who have energy and strategy and experience to make our movements stronger, and not close doors and say, well, maybe that's for another protest, or that's for another action. We're trying to do the same thing with No Kings, which is the mobilization that we're building for on June 14th. It is really rooted in the idea that we as a people reject authoritarian politics. We reject the corruption that we're seeing right now. And within those frameworks, there's so much to talk about, to bring to bear in this moment. It's not just about whether or not you think Donald Trump should be a king, or whether, or not you are opposed to his military parade. Military parade or not, he's spending millions of dollars on that while he's trying to cut services for working people. That is an angle that so many people can step into, even if your particular organization or your coalition network is more focused on the economic impacts of this moment rather than the authoritarian political threat of this moment. This is relevant for you. There's a lot to be said about how Donald Trump is trying to take away other centers of power. He's trying to consolidate power within the executive, within his political project. And those other centers of power are the things that will prevent us from having a king in this country. Worker power, union power is a key example of that. And so we're really excited to be working with labor partners in this mobilization to turn people out. There is a space for anyone who is activated and mobilized in this moment. And we want not to just mix all of that in and say that we're consolidating under one message, but we want to make sure that those messages are emphasized. We want to talk about those things, because that's going to be mobilizing to an audience that maybe not everyone else in the coalition is able to reach right now.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense to me. And I think I'm excited about the like labor social movement, like unity, like that feels like such a big piece of the puzzle here. And I recently had Alex Caputo Pearl from United Teachers Los Angeles on, talking specifically about, if we want to actually be about like a 2028 general strike, that we also have to like have a hot labor summer every single summer from now until then, that like the momentum actually matters, and that like that those kinds of coalitions and that kind of collaboration makes a moment like that feel more possible and more real to me.
Yes, absolutely. And the May Day was a really great example of this too, where we saw a big coalition, but it was largely led by labor groups and by immigrant rights groups, responding to not just the attacks of the day, which are significant and severe and need to be responded to, but also the history of May Day as an organizing vehicle and what it means. People came at it from that angle. People came at it from the angle of like, Donald Trump is currently attacking our communities, our worker communities, our immigrant communities. And it wasn't just some assimilation under kind of anodyne banner. It was both of those issues heavily featured and really prominent in how people were thinking about coming to the table that day.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I guess the other thing looking forward is like how, like, I'm also curious about how you then use these sort of like mass mobilization moments to like get people into a pipeline where they're taking like other meaningful political action, because like obviously I think being in the streets with people is huge and really important, and like needs to be observed, but also I think there's a way that like the sort of like media consent machine
Yeah.
that we like live in is like going to be dismissive of almost anything that we do that is like, I don't know, sort of like public facing in that way, that is like we're getting or like perceived to be sort of like the like typical tactics, right? And so I'm curious about the like progression of engagement that you all are thinking about, and like moving people through that process that is also about like, you know, when I think about organizing, I also think about organizing as a personal transformation process on top of a
Yeah.
like power building process. So I'm curious how you see and like how you're trying to like move people along a journey like that.
Yeah. So, the we have these moments of mobilization. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, a protest without a purpose is just a parade, and
Mhm.
which is actually going to be very appropriate on a day where there's going to be a military parade. We're in direct contrast with. Um, but one of the things I'm really excited about in building for No Kings on June 14th is that we're offering not just our hosts, but all of our folks a training series on the front end before the 14th on how to actually manage your event, how to build for your event, promote it, bring on volunteers, how to think about safety and de-escalation, how to knowing your rights. We're very excited. We're going to have ACLU work with us to do a Know Your Rights training ahead of that. But this is really about a high touch period where these folks have raised their hands. They said they're engaged. There is a date on the horizon where they will be making a choice on whether or not to stay engaged after that date. And so between now and then, we want to make sure that we're giving them the resources, the tools that are not just relevant for the 14th, but they're relevant for ongoing organizing
Yeah.
of their own communities. And then, after when we get to the 14th, we're going to be building with this broad coalition of, I think we're at 80 partners now for No Kings across labor and immigrant right groups and broad swath of communities to be building with them what the next set of CTAs might look like for this audience to make sure that they're continuing to engage in a way that feels additive and responsive to the moment and grows our power. So the next mobilization or the next protest, the next whatever it may be, is built by new voices. It has new bodies in and people with a little bit of experience now because they've got a big one under their belt.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I feel like this question of absorption has been like on the lips of like so many organizers that I talk to, and that like
Yeah.
the need to develop leaders and many leaders relatively quickly is like one of the things that I think a lot of folks are thinking about. So
Yeah, and the vision of an organizing home is really central to that conversation. And I think for a lot of newly engaged people, you're like, oh, an organizing home means I need to join an organization or a local group, which absolutely, like, do join a local group. There's thousands of them across the country. Indivisible groups are everywhere, which is great. But also, you have the power to be your own organizing home and to start organizing yourself. Get the resources and get the strategy that you need from the sources, the organizations that you want. But you don't need permission in order to take the next steps to start building your own bases of power in your own local community. You can be your own organizing home in many ways. But of course, the best way to get those resources and experience to do that is by participating in stuff like mobilizations and trainings and working with groups like, Indivisible, WFP, Move On, any of the other wonderful organizations, national or state level, that do a bunch of work to bring people on board and train them how to organize their communities.
yeah, and there's tons of places also to find the sort of like political education tools to like build unity in a group too. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm always talking about our like 7-part block and build syllabus, and I'm like, y'all use it. It's out there. It's free. It's on our website.
Yes. Yeah.
Go for it.
The incredible power of just having written something down is really something to behold, because that was the original power of the Indivisible guide, was that there was something written down on a Google Doc that was getting shared, and our founders were not planning on starting an organization, but people started organizing around this thing that was written and it was out there, and so it kind of self-motivated. But yeah, really, really wonderful to get those things down on paper and help build them.
Yeah, and I think it is a reminder that like things that move people can kind of come from anywhere, and I think that like we're in a moment where like there is a lot of opportunity. Not necessarily like advocating for replicating efforts, but there's like meaningful innovation to be done on our side right now. And that's one of the things that like, I mean, is frankly one of the things that's the most fun about doing this show, is I get to talk to a lot of the folks who are like trying stuff, like throwing that spaghetti at the wall and trying to come up with the ways that are going to work for us in this next period. So
yeah, I mean, we have to innovate and experiment, because if we don't, we're going to continue to fight the last war and somehow still lose it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the last war did not go great for us. So
yeah, we need to be setting the stage, setting the terms for the next one, and we can only do that by being creative and thinking through what it looks like to be an organizer in this next moment.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm also sure that your brain is just like completely like deeply occupied by a lot of these big political questions. Are there things that you are doing right now also to like take care of yourself, recharge, and like reconnect with like what keeps you going in this time?
It's funny that you asked that, because I am a big Star Wars fan. I don't know if you might have picked that up from my background here. And Andor, which is just the most incredible show, just finished. But it feels so relevant right now. I like come out of it. I come out of watching episodes and I'm like, oh, was I just working? Like, was I just in deep conversation about movement building and rising authoritarianism? Like, but it is Star Wars generally has been like a real balm for me, and being able to bring conversations about Andor into work and everything has been really invigorating. It's been
finally
great.
A show about inside-outside strategy.
Yeah, and leftist infighting. Who doesn't want to watch several hours of leftist infighting? It's really good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. And I forget what the actor's name is. The actor who plays Mon Mothma. I've like always been a big
Genevieve
fan.
O'Reilly.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan. Just like
She's
I'm very
incredible.
Mon Mothma.
She actually, her first role as Mon Mothma was in deleted scenes for Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Which she was great in those too, but those scenes got deleted, of course. They just re-released Revenge of the Sith a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago now, and I was really hoping that they did like a special edition re-release and put those scenes back in, because she's now like the star of one of their main shows. They did not. I was deeply disappointed by that.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm halfway through the second season of Andor. I've been traveling a lot the past couple of weeks. Just not a lot of time for fun screen.
Well, if you're about halfway through, I'd say it gets less fun.
Yeah, I understand that too. I mean, that makes sense, because like, I mean, we all know what happens. I mean, anybody who's following Star Wars knows what happens, because
yeah. Okay.
I was just saying, just like culminating in Rogue One, the best Star Wars movie. So
absolutely, that has been the thing that I've been thinking about the most and through and or two, is that so much of the storytelling there is about the regular people who don't actually get to be the heroes at the end of the story. They, are some of them are spies, some of them are just regular workers who do the right thing in the right
Mm-hmm.
moment. And their story doesn't typically get told, but they were central to making the Death Star at the end of episode 4 actually blow up. And having the opportunity to highlight the fact that you don't just need the people on stage, you actually need the people in the crowd. You don't just need the elected officials who are going to be up there giving long speeches or taking the right votes, but you need all of the folks who are doing the day after day after day work of maintaining faith that our neighbors and our community have power, that we can make a change. That is a really incredible thing to see put to screen, and I'm thankful that it got made.
Yeah, I mean it's a very different story than the chosen, special chosen kid story that we're used to, which I think is really important because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, we can't all be special chosen kids, but we can be protagonists.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we need the regular people to be
Yes.
protagonists right now.
Yeah.
We'll get our heroes.
Yes. Well, also look, nobody's coming to save us. We got to roll our own. So,
Yeah.
Dani, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for making the time to chat today.
Thank you, Caden. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Awesome. My thanks again to Dani Negrete of Indivisible for joining me today. We'll always have the ways to connect with their work in the show notes so you can find your local Indivisible chapter, learn more about what Indivisible is up to, and find them on the internet. This show is published by Convergence, a magazine for radical insights. I'm Caden Mock, and our producer is Josh Elstrom. Jimmy David designed our cover art. If you have something to say, please drop me a line. You can send me an email that we'll consider running on an upcoming episode at mailbag@convergencemag.com. And finally, if you would like to support the work that we do at Convergence, bringing our movements together to strategize, struggle, and win in this crucial historical moment, you can become a member at convergencemag.com/donate. Even a few bucks a month goes a really long way to helping our independent small team continue to build a map for our movements. I hope this helps.